Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this programme today we have a very interesting topic. We'll be discussing the plight of Ethiopian Jews, but also looking at the strategic developments taking place in the region, particularly with Turkey and Russia. Warm welcome to the programme, and my guest today is Gerald Gotzen from Ethiopian Horizons. Gerald, it's very good that you can join me today on the Middle East Report.
And I'm very glad to be here, and I believe this programme will make a real impact worldwide.
I hope so. Gerald, you've been a believer for such a long time, and the work that you do on behalf of Israel, and particularly on the work on behalf of Ethiopian Jews, is incredible, absolutely remarkable. But can you share with us something about your very colourful and very interesting family background?
It's very colourful and a real mixture. I have English blood, Irish blood, and a lot of German blood, because my mother was born in Berlin, my grandmother was born in Dresden, and my wife, for 54 years married to the same wife, and she's a great supporter, was born in Lithuania, but she's German. But I also have, through my grandparents and my great-grandparents, a lot of connection with Russia.
Excellent, and that's what we'll be talking about today. But can you share with us when you came to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, and how and when did he put a love for Israel and the Jewish people upon your heart?
I remember since maybe 4 years of age, 5 years ago, I always had a love for the Lord. And I used to experience his presence in many different ways. But the real commitment when I invited Jesus into my heart and my life was through a Youth for Christ meeting in Paynton at the age of 15. And then a few months later, I went to a missionary convention, Upton Vale Baptist Church, and I heard amongst the missionaries an Orthodox Jew who had converted to the Messiah, and his background and how he'd been rejected. And I had a real love for the Jewish people and from Israel at that time.
Amazing, amazing. So can you share with us how the Lord gave a real love and a passion for the plight of Ethiopian Jews in particular? Because this is something that you have been spearheading for over 5 decades now.
For many years, I've been working in Eastern Europe and in Russia. But the Lord had given me, when I was a little boy, a vision of Ethiopia. When I met my wife in Frankfurt am Main, I was working there for the Herald of His Coming. And immediately I fell in love with her. And when I proposed to her, I said, Ellie, I believe that God will call me in many different countries. Are you prepared to go with me and serve the Lord? And she said, I will do this. I love the Lord. I love you, even to the end of the world, even to Ethiopia. Because she thought Ethiopia was far away. But in less than 5 years, we came to Ethiopia, and it was a miracle. And we've been associated, connected with Ethiopia for 51 years. This year alone, I've been in missions and ministry in Ethiopia 5 times.
Incredible. So what's special about Ethiopia? Because we know geographically it borders many strategic countries in Africa, particularly Kenya and also Somalia and other nations,
Sudan.
as well, and Sudan as well. So very kind of Islamic strongholds in Africa. But what is special, do you think, about Ethiopia, and why is Ethiopia so special?
Ethiopia is very special because of its history, its association with the Bible and with Israel. And if you go out to Ethiopia, and I invite anybody and everybody to go out to Ethiopia, because Ethiopia is the land of history, dating back 3,000 years to the days of King Solomon and Queen of Sheba. It's the land of mystery. I know a lot about Ethiopia, but there are many things which I don't know about Ethiopia, and I'm still discovering. But it's a land of beautiful scenery. The mountains, the rivers, the lakes, and the land of destiny. You know, in the past, Ethiopia was called the land that God had forgotten and forsaken, especially during the times of the famine. But now Ethiopia is different. It has the fastest growing economy in Africa, between 8 to 9%, and the fastest growing church in Africa. And I'm including the renewal movement amongst the Orthodox Church and the evangelical charismatics. The Prime Minister recently said 25% of the population of Ethiopia, which is about 100 million, are evangelical charismatic Christians, and it's growing. And in the main congregations, it's young people, and that's why I like being there.
Fantastic. And can you tell us something about the Ethiopian Jewish community, particularly as they like to call themselves Beit Israel?
Beit Israel. Their history and their tradition is that they came to Ethiopia about 3,000 years ago. And there was a Jewish kingdom in Ethiopia, and that's why the Orthodox Church is so Jewish orientated, because when the gospel came to Ethiopia through the Ethiopian eunuch and also through St. Matthew preached the gospel in Ethiopia, and he was martyred for his faith in Ethiopia. But when many people, especially Jewish background, came to know the Lord, they embraced the Messiah, they embraced Christianity, but the Orthodox Church has still Jewish traditions, like circumcision on the 8th day. No other church in the world has this practice, like adhering to the laws of Moses of unclean and clean animals. You can't get a bacon sandwich or a pork pie in Ethiopia. So it's absolutely amazing what God is doing, not only in the Orthodox Church, but in the evangelical churches as well. And many Jews are coming to know the Lord in Ethiopia. And we have seen through Operation Solomon and before and now in the present Operation Wings of a Dove, most of the Jews are in Israel. They have made Aliyah. And this was their prayer for hundreds of years in their synagogues. Although they didn't call them synagogues, they called them holy places. Every Sabbath, the Jewish congregations in Ethiopia would face the north. Why the north? Jerusalem was north of Ethiopia geographically. And they would say this prayer: the hungry go to food, the thirsty go to water, but I shall go to Jerusalem. This was a dream. This was an expectation. And this was a prayer. And it's in reality, because most of the Ethiopian Jews, the Beit Israel, are in the land of Israel. Of course, there's been problems. Joshua, with the 12 tribes of Israel, when he went over the River Jordan, he had battles and difficulties and problems. But God was there, giving them the victory. And now in Israel, we have many, many Ethiopian Messianic congregations.
Amazing. And can you share with us how, through Ethiopian Horizons, that you've managed to team up with Jewish Voice and doing incredible work in providing humanitarian aid and assistance to the plight of the remaining Jewish communities in Ethiopia?
12 years ago, I met Jonathan Bernays. Very American, we all have a different culture. Very Jewish and very genuine. I love him, I respect him, and what a privilege from God to work with Jewish Voice. So I introduced Jonathan to not the Beta Israel, but to the house of Abraham. This is also a tribe which is now being recognized, in the process of being recognized by the Israeli government. There are about 50,000. And Jonathan met these elders, and he outlined his plan to arrange medical missions in Ethiopia. Then he went to bed because he was tired. The elders, there were about 12 of them. They said, "We like Jonathan Bernays. Can we really trust him?" And I only had met Jonathan a few days before. And suddenly, the Lord spoke to me, and I spoke to the elders. I trust him with my life. And since then, I've become a UK board member, and since then, 3 times a year, we have medical missions. Even we were invited 2 times by the president of Ethiopia to have a medical mission in the palace grounds with a prayer tent, with opportunity to receive the Lord Jesus Christ. I was in a medical mission 2 times this year, and in a place called Deborah Bahan, over 12,200 patients were treated by American doctors, nurses, and Ethiopians, and many of them Jewish people, the remaining Jews in Ethiopia, Muslim people, Christian Orthodox people really came to the Lord.
Excellent. So let's have a look at the work that Gerald has been involved in, and particularly providing medical assistance to many Jewish people in Ethiopia.
Shalom, I'm Ezra from Jewish Voice, and I want to welcome you to rural northern Ethiopia, the city of Touchgaint, where we're about to start about an hour and a half from now, our first ever Jewish Voice medical outreach here. Behind me, what you see are literally over 1,000 people who by word of mouth heard about this clinic opening this morning, this Sunday morning, and have queued up since 7 a.m., 5 hours and 10 minutes ago, just to see a doctor.
The impact here, both medically and spiritually, has been really incredible.
It's just crazy, just a primitive way just to see these people, but how blessed they are to come through and to be touched by the ministry of Jewish Voice. And what an honor to be a part of it.
This may be the only time this year, or maybe in their lifetime, that they have the opportunity to receive the treatment they need for free, paid for by those like you who love and want to be a blessing to the Jewish people and their neighbors.
I think of one story of a young boy who had received trauma to his eye and probably would never have received care. And somehow they heard that there was an outreach here, and they found our team, and we were able to treat him surgically and restore that eye.
Think about tooth pain, mouth pain that you would have to live with every day for months or years without the ability to see a dentist, either because there isn't a dentist in your community or just because you can't afford to see one. So we're thrilled this week to provide this much-needed relief in Yeshua's name.
You know, I could see the pictures and the little pamphlets and the updates Jonathan Bernays gives us, but to grasp the magnitude of this, I didn't have an appreciation for that.
You see Yeshua's ministry here happening. I mean, people are sick. They've got disease-filled feet, eyes with disease, cataracts, and they're being medically treated and supernaturally healed by Jewish people from Israel, by Jewish people from the U.S., ministering to Jewish people at the ends of the earth.
It's really been evident that if Jewish Voice wasn't here, many of these people would not receive the care that they're receiving now. there just are very few options for people in this region. And we know and we trust that that there is a greater plan here, and that's why we're here. And so what a privilege to be a part of it.
I don't think life gets any better than this. This is what we were made to do. So thank you, Jewish Voice, for making this possible.
One of the most rewarding things in our field, and it really has spiritual implications as well, is that somebody can walk up to us completely blind and within hours be seeing again for the first time. And so in a dramatic way, we often will see an elderly person who hasn't seen their loved one or their grandchild in a decade, and overnight we take off the patch, they can see, and there's much rejoicing. And it's an opportunity for us to really share what true vision is and who the true light is, Jesus Christ, Yeshua.
We're thrilled that these people are coming in pain and they're going to leave without it, knowing that they're loved and blessed.
Absolutely heartwarming. Gerald, very impressive.
Very challenging.
And I can imagine.
And it's going on today. 3 times this year, medical missions, just like that, impacting the people. Regarding logistics, the Americans are the best, I tell you. They bring all the equipment, all the medicines, and what they don't use, they leave behind.
Incredible. What are the Ethiopians like as a people? Obviously, I've met a few Ethiopians, but obviously I've never been to Ethiopia, so I don't know what the country's like, I don't know what the people are like. But can you describe for us your experience of Ethiopians, but also Ethiopian Jews as well?
The Ethiopians, in a way, are different because of their culture, because of their Jewish background and Christian background. They are very polite and friendly when they meet you. But they always have 2 questions in their mind, especially regarding those outside of Ethiopia. And these questions are in their mind. Why are you here? And the second one is, why are you really here? Because they have experienced 3,000 years of independence, apart from the Italian invasion for 5 years. So they are very independent people, and they don't want to be exploited. But if they really trust you, they will be your friend for life.
Wow. Well, that's quite a testimony. And if we go back to 1991, when we saw the biggest Aliyah operation on behalf of the State of Israel.
Operation Solomon.
Operation Solomon, exactly, in which virtually the entire Ethiopian Jewish population flew in aircraft from Ethiopia to Israel. How have the Ethiopian Jews been able to integrate into Israeli society?
It's been difficult because most of these Ethiopian Jews, especially the elderly people, are illiterate. Because in the past, they weren't allowed to go to school. They weren't allowed to be educated. For hundreds of years, they've been discriminated, isolated, and even persecuted. But they've always had this hope of Israel, the promised land. But in Israel, gradually, they are adapting to society. There are exceptions, there are problems, but life is problems. But it's the young people who are making an impact, because the young people learn Hebrew quickly. And the reason why they learn Hebrew quickly, because the Amharic language, or the Tigrinya language, which is spoken in Ethiopia, is a Semitic language. And now we have MPs, members of the Knesset, who are Ethiopians. We have many people, educated people, who have Ethiopian background. And in the army, the IDF, the Ethiopian soldiers, men and women, as you know, are highly respected and integrated in the IDF.
Let's look now at Ethiopians in Israel and some of the challenges that they face.
Early morning at the Beit Canada Absorption Center in Ashkelon, one of 16 in the country that are new arrivals' first home. Recent immigrants from Ethiopia are studying Hebrew. They're called Falashamura, Ethiopian Jews whose ancestors converted to Christianity but who have chosen to return to Judaism. They have been granted the same right of return to Israel that Jewish law gives all Jews. The Falashamura began coming to Israel several years ago from camps in Gondar, northern Ethiopia. They are the last of more than 80,000 Ethiopian Jews who emigrated in the past 3 decades. Gadi Yamharan came in 1991. He now works with a privately funded Jewish agency that manages the complicated process of immigration and integration.
I take them to the Ministry of Interior, to the banks, to the Ministry of Absorption. I accompany them through all the procedures.
The young adults learn more quickly than their elders. This group is already speaking Hebrew.
It was very hard in Ethiopia, but in Israel it's easy. I am happy here.
The children go to public schools in Ashkelon during the day. Afterwards, they come here for activities like skills development and sports. The director of the program, Leah Golan, says the center aims to provide a comfort zone.
So it's really a holistic approach, very cultural sensitive, in order to make sure that after 2 years or 1 year or 2 years at the absorption center, moving and becoming part of the Israeli society will be smooth as possible. And it's never smooth. It's always very, very challenging.
Yamharan says many immigrants are coming from rural areas in a developing country to the urbanized life of a developed state.
When they come, they find it difficult. Whether the language or the culture, even the weather, everything is hard for them.
Although there are many success stories in the Ethiopian community, rates of unemployment and poverty remain higher than in the general society. Golan, whose parents emigrated from Romania, says there is also discrimination, though that is changing.
Today, I think that there is a much more healthy attitude towards people that are coming from different backgrounds. It's first of all respecting the difference, and then understanding that each of the colors in the mosaic is entitled to get their own color, but at the same time to create one society.
Officials plan to wind down this program in a few years after the remaining Ethiopian Jews have arrived. Although great efforts are being made to help them adjust, for some immigrants it may take generations to feel really at home. Scott Bobb, VOA News, Ashkelon, Israel.
Interesting report, and this ends this section of the program, and now we're going to be discussing the role of Turkey and also Russia in prophecy and understanding why they are now dominating and influencing the Middle East. I know that this is what you wanted to really talk about, Gerald. So if I ask you about Turkey, because Turkey over the past decade under the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood President Erdogan, we've seen that Turkey's influence, Turkey's power and economic wealth is having a huge impact on the region. How has President Erdogan been able to achieve this?
Previously, Turkey was a secular state.
Yep.
But when Erdogan came to power, it is even more Islamic state than many other countries. And his agenda is to restore the caliphate, restore the Ottoman Empire. From 1517 to 1917, it was one of the greatest empires in the Middle East, controlling not only Turkey as we know it, but many parts of the Middle East, Arabia, and what is more important, they controlled Israel. Then it was called the land of Palestine. But what people don't realize, Turkey for 400 years controlled Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia, and Hungary as well. So when Erdogan says the restoration of the Ottoman Empire, he means not only the Middle East, not only Egypt, not only parts of Ethiopia, but even including parts of Europe and parts of Russia. And he's determined, because he has the largest army, the largest navy, the largest air force in the Mediterranean.
And how does he plan to achieve this revival of the old Ottoman Empire, as he sees it?
He, first of all, through diplomacy. He has very good relationships with Qatar. Now, Qatar is very political and is very friendly with Turkey. One of the reasons why Turkey has been influential in the Syrian civil war is Syria belonged to Turkey, and they want to take over in Turkey. Also in Ethiopia, Turkey is very influential in Ethiopia. Also in Somalia, they have 1,500 soldiers in Somalia. What are they doing there? So Turkey has this project, this agenda to restore the Ottoman Empire. Next year, they are saying that the Muslim youth of Turkey, Jerusalem, will be their capital. Actually, their goal is actually Jerusalem.
Interesting. And Gerald, when we're talking about President Erdogan and Turkey as a major power, why do you think that the West is not concerned or seemingly turning a blind eye to some of the horrendous human rights abuses that are taking place in the country, and also Erdogan's almost an elected dictatorship where anyone who opposes him, locking up of journalists, locking up civil servants, and the intelligentsia of Turkey? Shouldn't the West be more concerned about the direction that he's taking Turkey in, but also what's happening from Turkey, as you described earlier in this interview, going from a very secular state under the ideology of Kemal Atatürk,
yes,
and then moving more into the agenda of the Muslim Brotherhood?
Harry S. Truman, who was very pro-Israel, and he was a Sunday school teacher in a Baptist church, said these important words: if you want to know the future, you must know the past. Unfortunately, in the West, even scholars and historians and church leaders don't remember the past of Turkey. Because in the days of the Reformation, even Martin Luther and Calvin warned about the Ottoman Turks. They actually said in separate statements, the advance of Turkey and the Ottoman Turks into Europe until the gates of Vienna is a judgment of God upon a church which has turned its back against God. And you see, in the Bible, it says, if you don't serve the Lord with all your heart, you will serve your enemies. And that's, I think, what is happening to Europe. Europe is in decline of faith. It's all secular, it's all prosperity, it's all business. But the Islamists in Turkey and other countries, they have a living faith. And what they are doing is according to their faith, although I think it's wrong. Because we worship the God of Israel. We worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Lord Jesus Christ. Our politicians, our church leaders aren't really aware of the history and what is going to be done today.
Absolutely. Let's go and have a look at this report now that tells us why we should be concerned about the growing influence and power of Turkey under President Erdogan.
There's something that I say over and over again. This is not a system belonging to Tayyip Erdogan.
It's really never a good sign when a person, one, reversed himself in the third person.
I am a mortal being. I can die at any time.
And then two, more importantly, has to repeatedly deny that they're a dictator.
If you say ballot box produces a dictator, that would be unfair to the ballot box process.
On April 16th, Turkey narrowly voted yes on a referendum that will dramatically reorganize the government. It allows changes that give sweeping powers to the president, Tayyip Erdogan. He could have complete control of Turkey's budget and military, will be able to appoint judges to the courts without a vote, can dissolve parliament whenever he chooses, and can stay in power until 2029. This has prompted concerns that he's becoming too authoritarian. And these concerns aren't that outlandish, mostly because Turkey was built by an authoritarian.
If you look at the arc of modern Turkish history, it begins with Mustafa Kemal Ataturk.
First president of the First Turkish Republic, Mustafa Kemal, during the 1920s, is now granted dictatorial powers and is himself christened Ataturk, meaning father of the Turks.
Ataturk was a military general who created the Republic of Turkey out of the collapsed Ottoman Empire in 1923. During his 15 years in office, he enjoyed similar powers now held by Erdogan. He used them to build Turkey into a modern and secular state.
Turkey's new government separates church and state.
So he banned head coverings.
To Kemal, this headgear, the fez, symbolizes Turkey's Oriental fatalism and ignorance. He will abolish it.
He put mosques under state control.
Islamic traditions are shattered.
He made it basically illegal to discriminate against women.
He takes pleasure in the company of emancipated women.
He made women's education compulsory. He made literacy rates rise. He made schools open to everyone.
To make a modern nation, all Turkey must be sent to school.
Ataturk also industrialized his country. Under his watch, the industrial sector saw a sharp increase, and his liberal foreign policies built a close relationship with the West, which paved the way for Turkey to join the NATO alliance in 1952.
We know that Ataturk succeeded because for decades it was a modern, secular Western country like he wanted it to be.
Ataturk is dictator so that Turkey may never again have a dictator.
Now you have President Erdogan. President Erdogan is going in literally the opposite direction. He wants to make the country much more openly religious. He wants to get rid of a lot of what Ataturk had done.
But how does a religious, conservative leader acquire so much power in a secular country? To understand this, you have to know what happened to Turkey after Ataturk's death. For 5 decades, the country was constantly in a state of upheaval. Ataturk had given the military the responsibility of keeping Turkey secular, and they did so by staging coups in 1960, 71, 80, and again in 1997. While the interventions were meant to keep Turkey democratic, the instability left the country in poor shape.
In the 90s and even to the early 2000s, Turkey had completely stale economy. The GDP growth had slowed, unemployment was very high. It was seen as a very corrupt country, the government didn't function.
Enter Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He was the mayor of Istanbul from 1994 to 97. 2 years later, he was arrested for a public reading of a politically charged Islamic poem by a Turkish nationalist. Turkey was still a majority Muslim country, and his arrest made him popular with many who felt oppressed by years of the secular military rule. After a short jail sentence, he formed a moderately conservative political party, the AKP, which went on to win a landslide victory in the 2002 elections, and he became Prime Minister of Turkey. Erdogan went on to pull the country out of poverty by giving more opportunities to Turkish entrepreneurs and expanding access to foreign markets. This led to a sharp rise in the GDP, and inflation plummeted. Turkey's success even prompted efforts to join the EU. This all made Erdogan wildly popular.
It was like he came onto a boat that was listing and taking on water, and he managed to get the water out of the boat and make the boat sail straight again. So for many years, you could see why a man like this would be as powerful as he became. Then he went too far.
Over the next 10 years, Turkey continued to grow economically, but Erdogan started pushing more Islamist and authoritarian policies. He was quoted saying that he did not believe men and women were equal, and that women were meant to be mothers. His government also began arresting protesters and journalists under the guise of anti-terrorism laws. This stirred unrest in Turkey's more liberal urban areas. In 2013, there was a small, peaceful demonstration in Istanbul's Gezi Park to protest Erdogan's plans to reconstruct military barracks that would include a shopping center and a mosque. Seeing the demonstration as opposition, Erdogan sent in riot police to remove the protesters, which quickly attracted more protesters.
It got bigger and bigger because it was a proxy. It morphed from being a protest over a park to being a protest against Erdogan, against how religious he was becoming, and it got violent.
Previously, he had not been a brutal ruler. After this, he became a brutal one.
Erdogan began removing Ataturk's secular laws more aggressively. He ended the ban on wearing headscarves, tightened restrictions on alcohol sales, and freed mosques from government control. Then in 2014, Erdogan was elected president, which in Turkey is a ceremonial role with little real power. But that didn't put an end to the arrests made across the country, which indicated that Erdogan was still in charge.
And there were two groups of people who were terrified by this. One, the kind of secular Turks who looked back to Ataturk and said, "The hell's happening to our country?" The other was the military. And they were the ones, again, who believed that their core mission in life was to keep Turkey secular and that he was a threat.
So in July 2016, they staged a coup, and it almost worked. There was just one problem. The military couldn't get the public support this time. Erdogan had found a new way to reach his supporters.
I want to encourage my people to the streets and invite them to the airports. And together, as people gather, show them, by letting them come with their tanks, to see what they are going to do it right there to the people.
Erdogan had this amazing moment where he used FaceTime on his iPhone to kind of rally the country and say, defend the country, defend us against the military. Come Turks, come to me, come help rally around me. And it worked. You had secular Turks for the first time in years defend Erdogan. You had religious Turks literally streamed from mosques into the streets to fight the military. The military overstepped. You had Turkish F-16s fire rockets and missiles at parliament. Turkish tanks fired at people in the streets. That was very effective for him.
Erdogan emerged from the fighting more popular than ever and ramped up his purge of the opposition. More than 100,000 journalists, academics, military officers, and politicians have been arrested since the coup attempt. Tens of thousands remain in detention. This brings us to the recent referendum, which follows Erdogan's post-coup popularity. He set it in motion to acquire more power and to make it permanent. But the vote was much closer than it was anticipated, suggesting that much of the country wants to hold on to the secular Turkey created by Ataturk, and they're willing to fight for it.
But I do think you're going to have the inevitable tension of a president who believes he's entitled to more power, taking more and more of it, and what remains a somewhat secular country that isn't comfortable with giving him that power. Do those tensions play out politically and in court, or do those play out in the streets? If it's actual fighting and violence, then what we know of as a democratic Turkey is over.
An excellent report there talking about the power struggle taking place within Turkey. But I have to ask you, Gerald, what do you think in terms of Turkey? How much of a military threat does Turkey pose to Israel? And also, how does this relate to biblical prophecy?
In the Bible and in history, Israel is in the center. Look at any school map or office map, and you'll find on the wall, Israel is in the center of God's plan and purpose. Many people want to go to Jerusalem. The Muslims, the Mahdi, in their prophecies, Jerusalem is the center. Also, Turkey wants to go to Jerusalem. Turkey wants the keys of the mosque, the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, and the keys of Mecca. That's their political and religious agenda. When they have the keys of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and in Mecca, they can control the whole of the Middle East, even in Islam, the whole of the world, Islamic world. And that's their agenda. That's their program, is to go towards Jerusalem. And they will do it, I think, by Syria, also by this division between Shia and Sunni Muslims. This war, which has gone on for 1,300 years, since the time Muhammad died, is the most violent war in Islam. The Shia and the Sunni hate each other more than they hate Israel. And Turkey's going to use this Shia Sunni conflict. That's their ambition, that's their agenda. And they will do it by political means and religious means and pressure on Israel. And I'm sure they want a stronghold in Syria, which is near Israel.
And now talking about the role that Russia is currently playing in the Middle East. I mean, we've seen for the last decade, in particular, under President Obama, that we've seen a big withdrawal of American influence in the Middle East, which has created a vacuum, as we've seen with the Arab Spring, and that Russia has filled that vacuum. What are Russia's intentions in the Middle East, and how is their influence growing?
Their influence has always been there. Russia is a vast empire. Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, came to Russia over 1,000 years ago. They've been through the revolution for 70 years. Now there is an increase in Orthodox faith, including Putin, who was helped by the Jews when he was a little boy. Actually, when he was about 15 years of age, he used to go to every Sabbath to an Orthodox Jewish family. He goes to Jewish festivals, and he claims that he's a Christian. I've seen him on the YouTube in church in Israel, but Russia has also an agenda for Israel. Why? Because there are nearly 1.5 million, mainly, not all of them, Russian Jews there. And Putin has said, they're my people. The Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church with the Greek Orthodox Church, owns the most religious property in Israel. And if Putin can also get an influence as stronger in Jerusalem, that will be in his agenda. But what is going to happen, what I believe is going to happen, you see, we have this picture at the end of the cross in Moscow, the cross above and the crescent below. So what does that mean? Many people have been to Moscow. Maybe they haven't seen it, but when you get a close-up picture of this, the cross above, the Russian Orthodox...
I think we have it now, so if we can go to the picture now, which actually shows exactly what you're talking about, Gerald. Thank you. There we go. Do you want to talk it through
This
now?
is prophetic. What does it mean? Because Russia, in the past, had been invaded by Muslims, invaded by Turkey. So in their churches, in their monasteries, in the convents, they are praying regularly for the defeat of the Ottoman Empire of Turkey, because they always remember 1453, when the Islamic took over the Byzantine Church in Constantinople. Russia wants Constantinople, or Istanbul as it's called, a Christian country, an Orthodox country again. And I believe they're going to be an invasion sooner or later with the help of the Greeks, the Romanians, the Bulgarians, and other European countries. Because 100 years ago, Turkey was responsible for the greatest massacre of Christians in the world. 1.5 million Armenian Christians, nearly 1 million Greek Orthodox Christians, nearly 1 million Syrian Orthodox and Assyrian Orthodox Christians. And it's never been recognized. And if you read in Revelation chapter 6, according to the seals, the blood of the martyrs cry out to God. And this blood, which was 100 years ago, cries out to God. I believe there's going to be a conflict between Russia and Turkey, and eventually it will lead to Gog and Magog war in Ezekiel 38 and 39. And this is what we really ought to pray for. Russia is in the increase in the Orthodox Church. Putin says Russia is a Christian nation, Maybe he's very honest and sincere in saying that. But we Christians should be aware, Russia, Turkey, the Middle East, and especially Israel, because it all begins in Israel and it will always finish in Israel. When I was in Israel, in Ethiopia, about 3 weeks ago, I went to the AU, the African Union, which is the equivalent of the United Nations in New York. There are many Christians in the African Union. I went to meet some of them. We prayed together in the African Union. We read the Bible together, and they showed me this picture, and I'm going to read it to you. The Lord of the loose ends is in control. And friends, this is our responsibility. This is our challenge. Whatever is happening in the world today, God is sovereign and supreme in every situation. Amen. There's going to be a crisis in the Middle East. It's prophesied in the Bible. There's going to be conflict between Shia and Sunni Muslim. And I believe, I won't speculate when or where, there'll be a conflict between Russia and Turkey. But this will be used for the glory of God, that we will look up and see that the coming of the Lord is drawing nigh. You know, in 1217, Rabbi Judah ben Solomon, he was in Germany at that time. He had a prophecy about the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire, lasting for 400 years. And another rabbi from Vilnius said, when the Russians control the Crimea, and it happened 3 years ago, the coming of the Messiah is near. And this rabbi from Vilnius said, when Russia goes to war against Turkey, be prepared, look up, because the coming of the Messiah is near. So when all these things come to pass, look up, lift up your heads. The coming of the Lord is near. And in all this conflict, God is moving amongst the Muslims. Amongst the Muslims throughout the Middle East, especially in the Muslims in Ethiopia. God, the cross is our redemption. In the name of Yeshua HaMashiach.
Amen. That was a good little preach there. Very impressive. I didn't know about that, particularly the potential war between Russia and Turkey, because we've seen in the past year a couple of Russian fighter jets fly into Turkish airspace, or allegedly flying into Turkish airspace and then being shot down. So Turkey surely can't like the presence of so much Russian troops in Syria. And we have 2 minutes left of the program. So my question to you really is, Gerald, how do we prepare ourselves spiritually? How do we pray for Israel with these growing conflicts and the Russian-Turkish influence of power that's taking place right now?
We must avoid speculation, because in the past, there have been people who said this and this is going to happen at this time and that time. But we must see it's all about the Middle East. It's all about Jerusalem, where the temple was, the presence and power of God, where Jesus was crucified, where Jesus rose again, ascended into heaven, and is coming back according to Zechariah 14 and Revelation 14. So we must be, God is in control. God is moving also through the church, but through many different nations, that his purposes will be fulfilled. Revelation 5, verse 7. 7, verse 9, 14, verse 6. This is my hope. This is why I'm going as long as I can to serve the Lord. The gospel The good news will be preached to all nations, all tongues, all people. And Revelation TV is doing that. You're doing that. And I invite all the listeners, all the viewers, preach the gospel. Participate in the gospel.
Sorry,
in Jesus'
Gerald,
name.
I'm going to have to wrap up now,
okay.
but thank you so much for being my guest on the programme. And just thank you for watching today's Middle East report. Certainly learned something today, and it's important that we keep our eyes and our focus on Jerusalem at this time. So we will leave you with this song, in which, as Christians, Israel is not alone.
I think it's clear that Israel is doing what any country would do if terrorists rain down rockets on its cities and towns, hundreds of rockets, day after day, week after week. In the face of such wanton terrorism, no country could sit idly by. It would exercise its right, inherent and legitimate right of self-defense, as we are doing, and act decisively to end the threat to its citizens.
Rockets flying, people crying, everything's blowing up. They say you don't have a right to the land God gave you, you give, but it's never enough. How can things be so complicated when all you really want is peace? You try so hard to do what's right, and they just want you pushed into the sea. Israel, you're not alone. I will always stand with you. God gave you the promised land, and that I know is true. So don't give in. I'm doing all I can to stand with you. A lot of talking, no one's walking. It seems there's just no chance. What happened to justice, law, and righteousness today? Everything is such a mess. How can things be so complicated when all you really want is peace? You try so hard to do what's right, and they just want you pushed into the sea. Israel, you're not alone. I will always stand with you. God gave you the promised land, and that I know is true. So don't give in. I'm doing all I can to stand with you. When the rockets are coming down and everything is falling apart, lift your eyes to the hills, that's where your help comes from. Oh, Israel, you're not alone. I will always stand with you. God gave you the promised land, and that I know is true. So don't give in. I'm doing all I can to stand with you. Don't give in. I'm doing all I can to stand with you.
I ask not only for your support, I ask for your moral stance. I ask you to stand with Israel because it is right.